Howdy, I'm Garbo, and welcome to my new series I'm starting with the work-in-progress name of 5e Inquiries. In this series, I'll be scouring the internet for D&D questions and answering them to the best of my ability, and today I'm going to start by perusing the Dungeons & Dragons subreddit and going through the threads to see what people need advice with. I've played Dungeons & Dragons since 2010, and I will continue to do so in the far future, so I believe that my expertise will come in handy, even if it's only just another opinion in the pool of millions of players. A quick disclaimer, however, these are just my thoughts on any given questions. My answer is not always necessarily correct or the best option. I will try to remain to explaining the rules as written, as well as alternative examples I may have run myself with a given situation at my table. Enjoy the video and do leave your inquiries in the comment section below if you have a question you wish to have answered. To start off, the user JustMayDay asks, when rolling for a skill, do you add your proficiency modifier and your skill bonus, or do you just add your skill bonus? So, when you're determining a skill check, you will always start off rolling a 20-sided dice and adding your ability bonus that is relevant to that stat. So for example, if you are rolling for athletics, you would roll the 20-sided dice and add your strength bonus to the result. If you are proficient in the skill, you would then add your proficiency bonus on top of that, which means you are now rolling a d20, adding your strength bonus, and adding your proficiency bonus if you are proficient in athletics. Now this is where most other classes will leave off. But if you happen to be a second level bard or higher level, you have the Jack of all trades trait, which lets you add half of your proficiency bonus to any skill you are not proficient with. This does not stack on top of skills that you are proficient with. That means you will use your full proficiency for those skills. So bards at 3rd level and rogues at 1st level also gain expertise, which lets you choose a skill you're proficient with and add double your proficiency to the skill you're proficient in. And this shows up in your class table whenever it's relevant, so make sure you're looking out for it. So to recap, non-proficient skills, you roll a d20, add the relevant modifier for the skill, and if you're proficient in the skill, do the same thing, but add your proficiency bonus unless otherwise stated by your class. The user Relevant Board asks, my friends and I just started a campaign a month or two ago, and they had all played before, and I hadn't, so I just listened to them when they told me to be a barbarian half-orc, but I'm so bored. I have no choice in my attacks except to use my axe. Combat is just so repetitive, while all my friends can use any of their spells that they use in different situations. What can I do to make it more fun for me? Alright, well, you didn't stay in the subclass, so I'm assuming that your group is fairly low level, like level 1, level 2, which would explain why you have so little to do. For now, I would say just stick it out until you're 3rd or 4th level, as this is where things get a little more interesting for martial classes like the Barbarian. Think about what role you want to fulfill as the Barbarian. Do you want to be the super beefy tank in the front line for your party, taking blows like they mean nothing to you? Maybe you would try out something like the Ancestral Guardian, where you summon spirits of your ancestors to take blows and goad people into fighting you, shielding your team if they were to receive attacks. If you want to smack people really hard and just live up to the Barbarian name, try something like Berserker, where you smack people multiple times in your bloodthirsty frenzy. Or maybe Zealot, where you use the power of God to enhance your strikes, because who doesn't want to face a bloodthirsty rage with God behind him? Maybe you want something weirder. Play a Beast Barbarian. It lets you manifest a bestial appendage, where you rage and it gives you options to pound people, whether it's by slamming your tail into them or sinking your fangs into them. There's a lot of good options if you manage to wait it out, not to mention your DM may end up giving you magic items later on to make things even more interesting past that. If the class still doesn't seem appealing to you past level 3 or 4, try talking with your DM and see if they'll let you switch classes, now that you know a little more of what you're doing and what you want from the game. The user SyrupChugger3000 asks, are there any tips, guides, or sites for making my own gear for my players? I've seen so many cool pictures of weapon designs in this game, and I'd love to make my own custom weapons that are fun and useful without being too overpowered. Alright, if you want to go the homebrew route and create brand new items, I suggest this really great article online by Level Up Corner, and they talk about creating items and going through how to balance them out and giving them a purpose to exist. I'll put the link in the description below if you want to read through that. But if you prefer to watch videos, there was also a video made by the channel How to Be a Great GM, which discusses the creation of magic items, though you could always just use it for mundane items if you really wanted. An idea I use at my table when I DM is that if it's something that's really close to another item that exists in Dungeons & Dragons, like say a katana, I might use a weapon that's pretty close to how that katana would function. So maybe I would use the stat block for a longsword, but for all intents and purposes, it is a katana, just using the stats for longsword to keep it balanced. Talk with your DM and decide if that's something you want to make that's entirely new, or if reskinning items may be better for your group and your setting. Make sure you check the links in the description. Seriously, they're good. The user Lagger asks, how do you guys go about material components for spells? I honestly think they're hindering the fun and smoothness of gameplay, unless it's some dramatically expensive component, like say diamonds for Revivify and the like. I feel so annoying, not only to the players, but also to myself, going out of the way to ask my players, "Aha, but do you have a pinch of sulfur with you? What about a handful of clay, though? You're in a city where there's no clay on the ground, it's made of dirt. I'm terribly sorry, but your cantrip does not work." So, for now, I've laid down the homebrew rule that cantrips and first level spells don't need material components, but it feels kinda awkward. What are your guys' solution to this? So, if we're going strictly off of the rules as written here, your players would need spell components listed in the spell or cantrip in order to cast it. However, there is a mundane item able to be purchased from just about any magical shop or alchemist for 20 gold pieces called the component pouch. This replaces the need for you to have components, as it is assumed you will always have all of the basic spell components within it. The only exception to this rule is that if a spell lists a component that has a gold price listed specifically within it, like your example of Revivify, a component pouch could not provide such an item because it requires that you have a diamond worth at least 300 gold pieces, which the spell consumes in order to cast it. So you would need to track that, or your players would need to track that. Now, I believe that while these rules are good for people that want challenge in D&D, it's really whatever you make of it at your table in the end. If you want spellcasting to be harder, track each individual component, have your players store them in a pouch. Maybe make some spells free at your discretion if you want it easier. Personally though, at my table, we tried out a rule recently that you could cast lower level spells without their components, but you would have disadvantage on the attack roll, or the enemy would have advantage on a saving throw if you did so. That's probably not for everyone, but it gave players an active choice to make in doing so. So I suggest trying out some different house rules at your table and seeing what you like for yourself and going from there. D&D is what you make of it, after all. The user lefthandedbears asks, when an engagement ends and a character is rolling death saving throws, does that character need to continue rolling their death saving throws, or does he become stable since the engagement with the enemies has ended? Okay, so this is a bit of a weird one, but I'll try to explain how I understand the death saving throws work in 5th edition. So, when you reach 0 hit points but you're not killed outright, you drop unconscious, are unstable, and must make a death saving throw at the start of every turn, every round, until you either pass 3 saves and stabilize, or fail 3 saves and go bye-bye, or some other method like being healed or stabilized in a way like Spare the Dying. Since the rules specifically declare that you must make the throw at the beginning of every turn, when you are not in combat, there are no turns, so this is where it gets a little weird, and I understand why you asked the question. So I've seen this run in 2 different ways. I'll explain both. So the first way is that people would break down how quick a turn is in real time. So 1 minute in combat is equal to 10 rounds, which means after everyone in a given combat takes their turn, that is 1 round. 60 seconds divided by 10 rounds means that a round is roughly 6 seconds long. So every 6 seconds you would need to make a saving throw unless your party or some kind of bystander was quick on their feet to change your fate themselves. The other way that it's been run before, and the way that I personally run my games, is that you leave the initiative count open and run it as if combat were still going, letting players take their turn in that order until the situation has been resolved, whether that is with the unconscious player dying or being picked up in some kind of way. As a random side note, a lesser known mechanic in 5e and in the base rules of the game is that any creature within reach of the unstable creature can make a DC 10 medicine check as an action in order to stabilize somebody that is unstable. If it succeeds, you roll 1d4 to see the amount of hours until they are conscious again with 1 HP. Past this, it's really up to you to determine how deadly and chaotic you want your game to feel, so ask the DM at your table to decide, or decide yourself if you're the one DMing it. The user BootsMadeForWalkin asks, if you can attack several times per turn, can you cast melee attack-based cantrips like Green Flameblade on each attack? So if we're going based solely on the rules here, no you cannot. Extra attack is very specific in its wording, stating that whenever you take the attack action, you can attack twice instead of once with that action. This means that you are not spending your action in order to take the casting a spell action. Even if that spell uses a spell attack, it is not the same. As for casting spells like Green Flameblade, they take the casting a spell action, imbue your weapon for the given duration. In this case, Green Flameblade is instantaneous. And as part of the spell being cast, you can make an attack with whatever weapon you imbued with the spell, and then have the flame leak to the second target within 5 feet of the person that you struck with the attack, if it hits. Since this is a spell and not the attack action, you do not get to attack again. Nor can you use a second action to cast Green Flameblade again without the use of Action Surge from Fighter, because this is a second action. As a follow-up question, they also ask, in 5e, can you cast a melee attack cantrip as part of a reaction? For instance, here's an order of events that he lists. The first action, cast Lightning Lure. The second one is pulling the enemy towards you with the Lightning Lure. Third, use the Polearm Master's attack of opportunity when they enter your range. 4, use the Polearm's 1d4 bonus action attack. And they also ask, on the third point, when they enter your reach and you can make the attack of opportunity, can you also cast Green Flameblade then as well? So, let's break this whole thing down. I'm assuming that you have all these spells, all of the components, the hand's open, it's a fresh turn, etc. So you have everything. So starting out, you spend your action to cast Lightning Lure, which theoretically pulls the enemy within range of you. So, 1 and 2 go exactly as you described. However, within the rules, number 3 would not occur. Polearm Master specifically states that you make an opportunity attack against the creature entering your range, meaning that they would not incur an attack of opportunity since they are using forced movement to enter your range. The enemy did not use their movement or a spell to enter your range, that they did themselves, meaning an attack of opportunity does not apply here, even with the Polearm Master feat. This also means you could not use the Green Flameblade since you are not making an attack. But there are even more reasons why you couldn't use Green Flameblade, like your lack of an action, since you just used your action to cast Lightning Lure. You also can't use a cantrip as a part of an attack of opportunity without the Warcaster feat, which I do heavily recommend reading up on if you have the chance. It's on page 170 of the Player's Handbook. Awesome feat. Moving on. The fourth point, continuing with the same logic in the same turn, you also could not make this bonus action attack using Polearm Master, since it specifically states that in order to make this attack, you need to have made the attack action using a glaive, halberd, quarterstaff, or spear in order to make the bonus action attack. Your action was not to take the attack action. You cast a spell, Lightning Lure. So since you didn't use the attack action, and you didn't make an attack with any of those weapons this turn, you cannot do the bonus action attack. For the final question of the day, the user Mysterious Dinner 7822 asks, can monks use ranged weapons? So, monks, while not including any racial proficiencies here, they are proficient with simple weapons and short swords. This means that they are proficient with both simple melee weapons and simple ranged weapons, and you can also use them as a monk weapon, given they do not have the two-handed or heavy properties. This means you could use darts and slings both as monk weapons, and you could use the light crossbow and the short bow, but they are not monk weapons since they have the two-handed property. Also, as of the release of the Tasha's Cauldron of Everything supplement book, monks at 2nd level have a new trait called Dedicated Weapon, which after a short or long rest, you touch one weapon, and you make it a monk weapon until you use that trait again on another weapon. The requirements to do so are the following. It must be a simple or martial weapon, you must be proficient with it, and it can't have the heavy or special properties. This means that you can now turn light crossbows and short bows into a monk weapon should you use the trait on them. Even better than that, if you have proficiency from another source, like from your race, from the Weapon Master feat, or anywhere else, you could also use this feature on that. And with that, I now end off my first installment of 5e inquiries. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments section below, on my Twitter, or in my Reddit DMs, all of which will be linked below the video. Thank you for watching, and I do hope I made your experience in D&D just a little bit easier.